Work, please. Greetings and welcome. This is AP English. Today we are engaged in a conversation regarding Sophocles' Antigone. We will do three things this hour. You may want to jot these down as we begin the lecture. One, we're going to introduce real quickly Aristotle's Poetics one more time to review. Two, we're going to review the Sophoclean trilogy, as we often refer to it. That is to say, the three plays, Oedipus Rex, Oedipus at Colonus, and finally Antigone itself. And then finally, three, we're going to take a look at the play Antigone in more detail. We're going to ultimately apply the principles of Aristotle's Poetics to this play. Let's begin, first of all, however, by reviewing the primary principles of Aristotle's Poetics. Now, again, if you need review on this, you can always go back. You can watch more on Learn Strong about some of this information. Let's review. Aristotle argues that drama is important because the audience is going to go through a process. Mr. Schreiber, he calls what? What is that process of identification with the protagonist, and what does he call that?
Is it like the catharsis?
Catharsis. That's our key word, catharsis. What's the other word for catharsis, Mr. Wilson? Do you remember? Starts with a P. Purgation. Outstanding, Mr. Batson. That's right, purgation. That is to say, the powerful release of emotions. Emotions in what way? In what way? What kind of emotions? Fear and pity. Usually in that order. Fear and pity. That is to say, we will focus on the protagonist. This is crucial for our discussion of today. Let's define it one more time for our notes. The protagonist is that character in the play with whom, what? The audience most identifies with. Now, this is going to be crucial, and some of you maybe even wrote on this in your papers, that when you begin to think about the play Antigone, here we may run into a problem. You might even want to put a star next to that observation in your notes, and we'll come back to it here in a bit. That is to say, the simple question, who is the protagonist of the play Antigone as defined by Greek audiences, and that's going to be important for us. What would Aristotle have to say about who is the protagonist of the play Antigone? All right. Now, going through the process then of watching the performance, Aristotle said that the real drama occurs where? In the audience itself. In the audience itself. Not on stage. On stage is kind of like, what was the word picture that was used? A what held up to the audience? A mirror held up to the audience that the audience then sees reflected back into itself, its own concerns, its own worries. As the audience watches the fall of the protagonist, the audience will engage in two powerful emotions that are cathartic, Aristotle said. Fear. What does that one mean? The distinct potentiality that what? It could, in fact, could happen to me. It could happen to me. And to that degree, that's fearful. But what's this thing about pity again, Miss Anderson? What's that one about? The audience feels empathy or sympathy or pity. In what way? How does the audience feel empathy for the fall of Oedipus, for example?
Because it's tragic? And
it is tragic.
Unexpected.
It is tragic. That unexpected is huge. Let's write that down. The protagonist does not see it coming. It's the huge aluminum bat that you get in the face right as you come around the corner. You don't see it coming. Oedipus has no idea that he's killed his dad, married his mom, and had 4 children. No idea. None whatsoever. And to that degree, then, there is going to be all kinds of pathos. That's our Greek word, by the way. Pathos that the audience will feel. Now, let's move on. Sophocles is going to write an important trilogy of plays. Let's review them again quickly so that as we come to our review of Antigone, we have some sense of what we're doing. The first in the 3 orders, and by the way, he didn't write these plays in these 3 orders, but we certainly today study them in this order. The first is called what? Oedipus Rex. A story about a guy who is told, you will kill your dad, marry your mom, and have children with your mother. And so to save himself from that curse, he leaves the city of Corinth. Of course, Oedipus is, what did we call him? What is that? When a child is found in mythology, we call it a foundling. A foundling. Only he's not told By the way, we have these kinds of foundling stories all the time. For those of you that know your Disney Hercules film, you know all about foundlings, right? And the notion that children are found, they are raised. Sometimes they're not told. Sometimes the moment of their being told is the crucial early moment of their life. That's that angst moment. Erickson, the great educational psychologist, would say for kids, that's a powerful moment. If a kid is told, you were adopted, we're not your real parents, you were a foundling, this can create all kinds of anxiety. It's fascinating in the study of history to look at the number of foundlings who go on to do great things in the history of the world, maybe motivated by that. Oedipus ultimately does kill his dad, does marry his mother. What's her name? Jacusta. And then the play will open with a plague on the city of Thebes. Outstanding, the city of Thebes. I know some of these questions are coming in exam tomorrow. That's why I'm reviewing with you. And ultimately, how does the play Oedipus Rex end? Oedipus is a blinded, ruined, fallen protagonist. Remember, Aristotle said that the protagonist of tragedy begins high and ends low. Right? By the way, a 3A observation. We don't know a lot about what he said regarding comedy, but we can infer that he will reverse the order of that notion of the protagonist in comedy. That is to say, in comedy, Aristotle would probably have argued the protagonist begins low, a nobody, and ends high, maybe like the king of the country or whatever. I said 3A because you want to put a note there that when we hit Shakespeare, we're going to ask how Shakespeare was influenced by the idea of Aristotle's poetics, and what is it that he does in his comedies that's different from his tragedies in regards to the protagonist. The play Oedipus Rex will end with Oedipus being led on stage by, his daughter Antigone. Where is his other daughter? What's her name? Ismene. And where is Ismene? She has run off. She is afraid. She is scared. She is also ashamed, let's point out. What about the two sons of Oedipus? And their names as well? Polynices and Antigone. Yes, Barney's done this right here, which means what? Yeah, right. We've got the psycho moment, right? Okay. This is the Cain and Abel story, writ at large, the motif of brother killing brother, only tragically in the story of Oedipus Rex, the two brothers actually end up killing each other. Right? So this isn't just Cain killing Abel. This is Cain killing Abel and Abel killing Cain. And there is blood then on the walls of Thebes by the two sons. Now to the very end of Oedipus Rex. And it is huge to appreciating the third part of the trilogy. Oedipus is asked to leave by the current new king of Thebes. His name is what? Creon is who in relationship to Jacusta? He is the brother of Jacusta. We won't get into the nuances of the inbreeding that's at play here. Sorry about that. But we will then notice that there is an agreement. This we call the agreement at the end of Oedipus Rex, and it's a huge, huge agreement. Oedipus agrees to what? What is his agreement? I'll never come back to the city of Thebes and therefore, return the plague. But the understanding is what? I'll do that on what grounds? Creon promises what? I'm going to take care of the 4 children of Oedipus Rex, Creon says. I promise that I will help for that to happen. Okay? It's a context port in 303. Right? With that in mind, we now jump to Oedipus at Colonus. I cannot say much about this play, unfortunately. This is a brilliantly constructed play as well. I'll say 2 things. 1, Oedipus is no longer living in Thebes. He's now in a small grove outside of the even smaller town of Colonus. There, he is told 2 pieces of information that are of importance. 1, he is told that his 2 sons have killed each other as they're fighting for power. Write the word power down and circle it. It will become one of the central themes of the rest of the plays of Sophocles in this trilogy. 2, Oedipus is told as well that his daughters are ashamed of him, and only Antigone will stand by his side. At the end of this play, you have a moment where Oedipus is in some ways, it seems, kind of going through his final death throes, and he dies. Oedipus at Colonus, Oedipus dies. Okay? Leaving only alive of this family the 2 daughters. Now to begin Antigone. The play Antigone will open some days later. there has been an edict by King Creon regarding the burial of the two sons. What is that? What is that edict? One can be buried, the other will not be buried. Jot down who is allowed to be buried of the two brothers, Polynices or Autocles. Who gets burial? Autocles gets proper burial because he was, according to Creon, defending the city. On the other hand, we're told Polynices, what? No burial. His body will be left out for the carrion, the birds, to eat. I don't get it. So what? What's the big deal?
They should both be buried because they're family.
Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, said the following. If you want to know about a culture, study two important ceremonies. How it celebrates a birth and how it celebrates or grieves a passing, a death. Study what cultures do with funerals, and you'll learn a whole lot about those cultures. We think, of course, of the Egyptians. We certainly as well think of the Greeks in this regards. You gotta bury the body properly. Give me a reference to the end of the Iliad in regards to why we know that's so important. King Priam of Troy sneaks into the very Greek, right, tense, so that he can beg for what from Achilles? Why does he want his son's body? The body is the corpse. It's a corpse. He's dead. Why does he want the body? This is central. You must give a proper burial, right? You must give a proper burial, especially, this is key, you have a moral obligation to do so if you're a relative. If you're a relative. So, for example, a father must bury his son. The problem, of course, is going to be who will bury the body of Polynices after the edict. The play will open with the two sisters conversing. Antigone says what? We got to do this job. Let's bury the body. Ismene, the sister, says what?
I'm scared.
She does Wally hands, right? Oh, I don't think so. This is bad. Something bad's going to happen. In fact, interestingly, she says at the very opening lines of the play, we are women. Men make the laws. We obey the laws. I cannot go against what Creon says. Besides that, she says it's foolish because there's now been an edict handed down. What is that edict? Whoever buries the body of Polynices, what?
Jacked.
In what way jacked? How? Death by what?
They get buried.
Stoning. Death by stoning. Now this doesn't mean a lot to you until I tell you how they did this stoning thing. They would dig a big hole. Let me explain how they would do this. Dig a big hole. They would put you in the hole. The hole was dug so that it came up right to your shoulders. Small baseball-sized rocks were thrown by professional throwers so they would not hit the head. You did not want to kill this person with these rocks. The initial rocks were simply to inflict early pain. As the rocks hit the body, fall into the hole then obviously fills, so that in the end, the only thing remaining is the head, right above the hole. Then a large boulder would be picked up by several bodies, taken over the head, and dropped. This giving two advantages right away, Mr. Batson. One, immediate death. Two, you don't have to bury this individual. This person already has a burial, you see. Right? So in other words, this is death. This is death by stoning. This is death by stoning. And to this degree, Ismene says, sounding very, I think, normal here, I really am not interested in big rocks getting thrown on my head. So I think I'm going to go ahead and stay away from that one. By the way, point out at 3a, remember how Golding has Piggy knocked off. Do you remember from Lord of the Flies? Do you remember?
I remember that.
Lord of the Flies, Golding will have Piggy killed by a large boulder being dropped on his head. If you have your understanding of Greek mythology, you're aware of the ways in which Golding's playing a game there. Antigone says to her sister Ismene what? Fine. I don't care. I'll do it alone. I'll do it alone. And to that degree, the play will now unfold. So Antigone goes and buries the body of her brother Polynices. King Creon is informed of this. When he is told about it, his immediate assumption is what? Who buried the body? Does he assume that it's Antigone? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. He immediately assumes somebody's done it for pay. That somebody has paid off, right, somebody else to go and bury this body. Now let's point out, burial here does not mean under the ground. It only means a sacred ceremony of sprinkling of some dust. As long as that's done with certain words spoken over the body, ceremonial maybe rites of water being passed over the body of Polynices, that will constitute a burial. That has now been done. Creon is informed by a messenger. This was done, and the messenger swears we didn't do it. Creon's response is, you better figure out who did it, or I'm going to crucify or kill or stone or whatever you. The next scene is pivotal. Antigone shows up. Creon's observation is, you cannot be the one who disobeyed my law. To which Antigone is extremely proud, very much like her father Oedipus. You bet I did it, and I would do it again. And here's why. What is her justification for burying the body, Miss Kennedy? She breaks the law, but she says why?
Because, like, he's her relative?
There's a higher law, huh? What is that higher law? It's the law of the gods, but what is that higher law?
Moral.
You must. There is a moral obligation. Back to Priam and his son, right? Back to Priam and his son. There is a moral obligation that we must bury the bodies of our brethren, of our family members. By extension, Antigone's really going to argue, Mr. Wilson, King Creon should have done it. Now, why should King Creon have taken care of the body of Polynices? What oath did he make at the conclusion of Oedipus Rex?
Take care of the children.
Bingo. Right, bingo. Creon, on the other hand, has a different view of this. Let's write it down. This play immediately becomes hyper-political. Political. Over relating to sociology and the laws that govern groups, not the individual. Creon says, I have made a rule, and that rule must be followed. Therefore, she must die. The chorus, who will play a pivotal role in this play, is kind of like, oh, you're going to kill her? And then immediately Creon, who loses his temper, he says, yeah, I'm going to kill her. I'm not going to kill her. I'm going to kill her sister too, Ismene. Bring her in. Ismene's brought in. She's, of course, now horrified. She's going to die. But when asked if she was a part of this conspiracy, she says, yes, I was part of that. Antigone's response is interesting. Does anyone remember? What does she say?
No.
Back to us. She's like, no, you're a liar.
Yeah.
I gave you the chance to help me, and you didn't want to help me. You've got nothing to do with this. I'm going to die. You got to live with your shame. Right? And the chorus is like, whoa. Antigone is a hard woman. She is a woman of passion, but she's a hard woman. And Ismene, in fact, says back to her sister, you're not being very sisterly to me. You're not being very nice to me. And Antigone softens and she says, yeah, you're right. Creon points out these women are blubbering fools. Look at them kind of blubbering on and crying. Of course, the reality is the only one crying is Ismene. Antigone's got no fear at all. In fact, she says to Creon, I got no time for you. If you're going to drop a rock on my head, and let's get it done. Let's get it over with. One of the members of the chorus says, King Creon, you're going to kill. And then what does he say? The chorus says it, points it out, reminds Creon.
Kill Oedipus' children.
That's important, but that's not what he says at this moment. Wait a minute. Sophocles is going to play a nasty game with us. Antigone has a guy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Oh, and Miss Anderson went like this. Right. Oh, yeah, a guy. Who is the guy? Who is the guy of Antigone? His name is Haemon. Who is Haemon? Haemon is Creon's son. Now, don't get caught up in the, wait a minute, doesn't that make Antigone and, relatives? You could just leave it alone, leave it alone. We have a pivotal moment. Are you ready for this? We have a pivotal moment.
She likes her cousin.
When Creon says, yeah, I'm going to kill the fiance of my son. What do I care? There, he says, it's hard to translate out of the Greek, but the way it's usually translated is, there are plenty of fields to plow, which has all kinds of double, obviously sexual double entendre, right. Now that Mr. Schreiber's awake, you have all of this interesting kind of double, triple meaning thing happening, but let's get to the fundamental observation. Creon has no problem killing Antigone, the fiance of Haemon. and she is taken out. You have a prelude scene where the chorus will speak about the challenges that are now in front of Creon. And then Creon and Haemon have a pivotal moment. I'm interested in you studying that moment. This is about an 11-minute exchange. I want us to take a look at it now. You're going to be now on my TV. Haemon and Creon. Jot down in your notes, please, some observations before we watch. Think about the distinctions that Sophocles draws between father and son. I jot these down. Father and son. Between youth and old age. And between man and woman. Watch how all three of these dichotomies are going to get manipulated in the course of this brief scene. Watch how the emotions as well escalate through this scene. All right?
Gone for the last of your sons. What relief from his consuming fears and the bitter penance of tears.
Has he come to beg for mercy for his beloved Antigone?
We shall learn that from his own lips without any need of fortune tellers. My dear son, I don't doubt you've heard the news of our final decision. The condemnation of your fallen guilt. You come here, I hope, not in any spirit of anger against your father, but understanding that we are always comrades, and my love for you is unshaken.
I know I'm your son, Father. I understand the depth of your experience in matters of state, and I try to follow and benefit from it whenever I can. Any marriage would be worthless to me that didn't have your approval and love.
Good fellow. Well said. A father's opinion should always be influential with his sons. And fathers with young sons, when they pray for them, ask especially that they should grow up to be loyal, reliable, obedient, the first to strike at their father's enemies, just as they are the first to support his friend. A father whose sons yield no such profits from the investment of his parenthood, breeds grief and sorrow as his offspring, and becomes himself a figure of fun, especially to his enemies. Don't be taken in, boy. Don't let any woman ensnare you by exploiting her sexuality or any of the attractions that lure infatuated men into submission. God help the lovesick fool who marries a dominating woman. Passion never lasts. And a cold bedroom breeds cold hearts, anger and bitterness. But there's no hatred so violent as the hatred of two people who were once in love. Get rid of her, my boy. This girl's an enemy, no good to you or your best interests. Kick her out.
All right, here we go.
To find herself a husband that suits her among the dead. Don't deceive yourself. She has been openly apprehended performing a criminal act against the state. She's a confessed traitor. But if I were to spare her life, I too would betray the state and its law and everything I stand for. I will not do it. And she must die. Let her pray to Zeus till she drops. Let her assert she stands for family, love, and ancient virtues, and all the rest of it. If I tolerate treachery in my own house under my very nose, how can I crush subversion anywhere else in the city or in the state at large? A man who rules wisely within his own family is more likely to make sensible judgments in political matters, in his direction of the state. To pervert the law, to twist it, to serve one's own ends or the interests of one's relations, that cannot be allowed. Neither in states nor in cities, and will not be allowed by me.
For your notes, the need for law and the application of jurisprudence when laws are broken.
Unquestioning obedience to whomsoever the state appoints to be its ruler is the law, as far as I'm concerned. And this applies to small things as well as great ones, just or unjust, right or wrong. For who is to choose these things but the king? The man who is wise in his direction of his family will be equally firm in power. His wisdom will be equally remarkable, whether as king or indeed as subject. In times of war and national danger, he will be the man you can rely on, the man you feel safe with fighting beside you in the front rank when the battle becomes critical. In discipline, anarchy, disobedience, what greater scourge than that for humankind? States collapse from within, cities are blown to rubble, efficient armies are disorganized, and potential victory turned to disaster and carnage, and all by disobedience, anarchy, indiscipline, whereas the well-conditioned army that asks no questions, stands firm, knows nothing, needs to know nothing, and wins, thus saving the lives of millions of honest people.
The need for discipline.
Authority is essential in any state, and will be upheld in this one.
He says, I have no choice.
There will be no yielding to female fantasies, not by so much as an inch. And if we must be deposed, let it be by a man's hand, eh, son? Not by a conspiracy of women.
All right, here it comes.
If an old man is fit to be judged, Lord Crayon, you have spoken rationally, sensibly, and with the wisdom gathered from long experience.
Father, the most enviable of a man's gifts is the ability to reason clearly. And it's not for me to say you're wrong, even if I were clever enough or experienced enough, which I'm not. But it's also true to say that some men think differently about these things. And as your son, my most useful function, it seems to me, is to keep you in touch with what other people are thinking, what they say and do and approve or disapprove of, and sometimes what they leave unsaid. The prospect of your disapproval is a great silencer of most men's tongues, and some things are never said for fear of the consequences, but I can sometimes hear what people whisper behind their hands. And everywhere, I hear sympathy expressed for this unfortunate girl, condemned as she is to a horrifying death which no woman has ever suffered before, and unjustly, in most people's eyes, in burying her brother who was killed in action. She did something that most people consider decent and honorable. Rather than leaving him naked on the battlefield for the dogs to tear at and cuts and scavengers to pick to the bone, she should be given a medal for it, those same people say, and her name inscribed on the roll of honor. These things are whispered in secret, Father, and they've reached my ears. Sir, your reputation matters to me as much as your good health and happiness does. Indeed, your good name matters more. What could a loving son be more jealous of than his father's reputation? And what could please a father more than to see his son's concern that people will think well of him? Then let me beg you to have second thoughts, and not be certain that your own opinion is the only right one and that all men share it. The man thinks he has the monopoly of wisdom. Only what he says and what he thinks is of any relevance reveals his own shallowness of mind with every word he says. The man of judgment knows it's a sign of strength, not weakness, to value others' opinions and to learn from them, and when he's wrong, to admit it openly and change his mind. You see it when a river floods. The trees that bend survive. Those whose trunks are inflexible are snapped off short by the weight of water. And a sailor in a storm who refuses to reef his sail and run with the wind is likely to end up capsized. I beg you, Father, think twice about this. Don't let your anger influence you. If a man of my age may lay some small claim to common sense, let me say this: absolute certainty is fine. If a man can be certain that his wisdom is absolute. But such certainty and such wisdom is rare among men. And that being so, the next best is to learn to listen and to take good advice when it's offered.
There's a lot of sense, my Lord Crayon, in what this young man has said, as indeed there was in everything that you said, too. The fact is, you are both in the right, and there's a good deal to be said for either.
All right, here we go.
I expected to listen and take lessons in political tactics at my age from a mere boy.
I'm a man, Father, and my arguments stand upon their merits, not my age. I am for common justice, no more than that.
Oh, they stand upon their merits, do they? Well, what merit is there, please tell me, in breaking the
I
law?
wouldn't defend her if she'd broken the law.
But she has broken it openly, frequently.
Listen to the people in the streets, Father. The ordinary Thebans. They say she
I
has...
have never based my political principles on the opinions of people in the street.
Now you're the one who's speaking like a boy.
I am speaking like a king. It is my decision. I will act according to my own conviction.
When the state becomes one man, it ceases to be a state.
The state is the statesman who rules it. It reflects his judgment. It belongs to him.
Go and rule in the desert then. There's no one there to argue with you. When a king, you'll be there.
This boy of mine is on the women's side.
Yes, if you're a woman, I am. I'm on your side, Father. You know that.
You damned impertinent devil! Every word you say is against me, your own father!
I know you're wrong. I have to speak.
How am I wrong? By maintaining my position on the authority of the state, is that wrong?
When position and authority right roughshod of the moral field.
You're weak and uxorious and contemptible with no will of your own. You're a woman's mouthpiece.
I'm not ashamed of what I'm saying.
Every word you said pleads for her.
I plead for you. And for myself and for common humanity. Respect for the dead.
You will never marry that woman, never. Not this side of the grave.
If she dies, she
Here it
will
comes.
die alone. There'll be 2 deaths, not 1.
There it
You're
is.
threatening me. How dare you threaten
No,
me?
that's not a threat. I'm telling you, your plan was misbegotten from the beginning.
Misbegotten! Dear God, if anything's misbegotten here, it's my son! You'll regret this, I promise.
If you were my father, I'd say you were demented.
Father me! You're a woman's plaything, a tame lapdog!
Is anyone else allowed to speak? Must you have the last word in everything? Must all the rest of us be gagged?
I must. And I will. And you, I promise you, will regret what you've spoken here today. I will not be sneered at or contradicted by anyone. Sons can be punished too. Bring her out, the condemned woman, the criminal. Let her die here and now in front of him.
Watch this.
This passionate bridegroom of hers. You can watch the execution.
That's one side I shall never see. Nor from this moment. Father, will you ever see me again?
And there it is. Jot down real quickly, what do you see as the most central conflict of a scene like that? Of the 3 that I, for example, suggested to you, what do you find as the most central conflict of the 3? Jot down real quickly what for you it was. And then I'm going to try and frame it in the most clear kind of language that I can for you as well, all right? You know how the universe sometimes conspires in regards to timing? And I can't explain how this works, but no kidding. You know, for years I lectured this play to sophomores. No kidding. One afternoon, right after lunch, I'm sitting right over there on the heater, talking, giving this lecture. We're talking about this play. Into the room comes a student who I had marked as absent. This student was one of our students who was known within the school to sometimes create controversy. He comes walking in. He opens my door. I had a different door. And he opens it, and it didn't have that thingy on the top, so when he opened it, it just slammed against the thing. He was torqued off. He comes in. I had desk at the time. He comes in, he slams his books down on his desk, he screams out a couple of obscenities about the administrator that he had just seen, the assistant principal. We're joined by an assistant principal, ironically. And he slams his books, and everyone is just like, oh, what's McGee going to do? And again, he says something about the current vice president, or vice principal. This was a number of years ago. And everyone's kind of waiting to see what I'm going to do. I cannot tell you the moment of recognition of irony that I'm lecturing on Antigone as this happens. So I turned to him, and he was just waiting, of course, for me to, nail him or whatever. And I said really gently, I said, "Oh, don't worry. Soon, you'll be the principal. Don't worry." And he's like, "What are you?" And he's ready to get mad. "I will never be." I said, "No, you don't understand." I said, "It's not a question